Hi folks, it's Mark Merrill with Firm, Fairness in Reporting Media. What is really the wording and the explanation in the Constitution? And what does it say about freedom of the press? We're going to get into it a little bit. The latest from a website on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights breakdown on the First Amendment, or freedom of the press is what we're going to be aiming for, folks, is from constitution.congress.gov/browse/essay/amendment1. It's an overview of freedom of the press, Constitution annotated in congress.gov in the Library of Congress. Sounds like a good place to start when they want to keep telling us that we don't have any free speech anymore in this country, in D.C. Detestable Congress. Anyway, to begin the program, folks, let's get right down to it, shall we? Constitution annotated. Amendment 1.9.1 overview is the way it's published, folks. And as we said, it is the overview of freedom of the press, Constitution annotated, congress.gov, Library of Congress. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble. Yeah, it says peaceably. Good luck with that from the deflectocrat side, right? And to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Well, gee whiz, that's kind of been overlooked, hasn't it? Or has it been kind of flushed down the toilet, is more like it. Swept under the proverbial rug, as back in the day. Now, some have raised the question of whether the Free Speech Clause and the Free Press Clause are coextensive with respect to protections for the media. A number of Supreme Court decisions considering the regulation of media outlets analyzed the relevant Constitution protections without significantly differentiating between the two clauses. We're going to go through a couple of those rulings, folks, but not spend too much time on them. In one 1978 ruling, the court expressly considered whether the institutional press is entitled to greater freedom from governmental regulations or restrictions that are non-press individuals, groups, or associations. Justice Potter Stewart argued in a concurring opinion that the First Amendment speaks separately of freedom of speech and freedom of the press. It's no constitutional accident, but an acknowledgement of the critical role played by the press in American society. Yeah, if we had a responsible press. The Constitution requires sensitivity to the role and to the special needs of the press in performing it effectively. In a plurality opinion, a Chief Justice Warren Burger, some of you may know or remember when he was on the bench or on the court back in the late 70s, he said the court does not yet squarely resolve whether the press clause, freedom of the press, confers upon the institutional press any freedom government restraint not enjoyed by all others. The plurality ultimately concluded the First Amendment did not grant media the privilege of special access to prisons at that time. Several court holdings firmly point to the conclusion that the Free Press Clause does not confer on the press the power to compel government to furnish information or otherwise give the press access to information that the public generally does not have. Sounds to me like the lamestream media, as we're going to start calling them, folks, here at Firm. They're in big law trouble with their lawfare. In many respects, The justice went on, nor is the press entitled to treatment different in kind from the treatment to which any other member of the public may be subjected. The court ruled that generally applicable laws do not offend the First Amendment simply because their enforcement against the press has incidental effects. At the same time, the court recognized that laws targeting the press or treating different subsets of media outlets differently may sometimes violate the First Amendment. Further, it does seem clear that to some extent the press, because of its role in disseminating news and information, is entitled to heightened constitutional protections, that its role constitutionally entitles it to governmental sensitivity, to use Justice Potter Stewart's word. And some footnotes on this, folks. These are cases that came up before the Supreme Court over the years, or the existence, I should say, of our country. One example was an interesting one, that we found anyway. Under footnote number 8 on this website, we'll publish it up there for you, folks. Grosjean versus American Press Company, 1936, just after the Great Depression. Holding that attacks focused exclusively on newspapers violated the freedom of the press. Taxation, once again, folks, without representation. And here's 3 we want to mention to conclude this portion of what actually is freedom of the press under the constitutional law. Miami Herald Publishing took on Tornillo in 1974. Landmark Commissions versus Virginia in 1978. Several concurring opinions were in Richmond Newspapers versus Virginia in 1980. This one right here, folks, is what we want to focus on right here. It says a lot about what we're going through in 21st century 2025 America. The Supreme Court had suggested that the press is protected in order to promote and to protect the exercise of free speech in society at large. I'm going to read it again. The Supreme Court has suggested that the press is protected in order to promote and to protect the exercise of free speech in society at large, including people's interest in receiving the information. That speaks volumes to me, and it should to you too, folks. 3 examples took place over a period of 50 years. 1936, actually, I'm sorry, go back a little bit, 1978, 1966 was Mills versus Alabama. The more recent one was CBS, the network, versus the Federal Communications Commission in 1981. The court has suggested that the press is protected in order to promote and to protect the exercise of free speech in society at large, including people's interest in receiving information. Gee, that kind of spells it out altogether, doesn't it, folks? And by the way, what you're looking at here, folks, is just a section of this right here. Pocket pamphlet that just about everybody in the country should have, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, all wrapped into one. Suggest you get one. And you can get one going right here to Hillsdale College. Look them up. I'm sure you can find plenty of opportunities there to order your copy, and maybe lots for family members. As we move on, folks, the battle, of course, with Janet Mills and Donald Trump keeps going on and on and on and on. Yuck. She just won't seem to give up, or doesn't want to give an answer to the whole thing about Title IX. She keeps going back and forth to her old ways. The Human Rights Act, Maine Human Rights Act, the Maine Human Rights Commission overrides the federal government. I'm going to say, just flat out, folks, I've never seen such a dumb bunny in charge of an entire state in all my life. And I've lived here the majority of my life. Get real, Janet. Here's what she had to say recently, though, folks. This is the kicker right here. Ms. Mills gave her so-called reply to the president's question about Title IX, or whether she's going to also apologize or not, or make a decision. She has both, and she's better do them fast. We're getting towards the end of the month, and the 1st of April is coming up. She responds in this manner to the dispute over transgender athletes last month, covered by WAGM and WPPI up in Presque Isle in northern Maine. This was published with assistance by the WABI news desk on March 24th. They caught up with the governor at an event in Bangor that she was attending, celebrating the purchase of the Cedar Fall mobile home park by residents. Quote, "I don't communicate with public officials by tweet or Instagram or social media," she said. "Second of all, my issues are about the rule of law, pure and simple." No, it's not. It's not about transgender sports. It's about who makes the laws and who enforces the laws. Wow. I kind of think we all know that, don't we, folks? She says, "I read the Constitution. The Constitution says the president, the chief executive, shall take care that the law be faithfully executed. It doesn't allow him to make laws out of whole cloth by tweet or Instagram post or press release or executive order. That's fundamental law." And she says, "I stand for the rule of law and the separation of powers." You swore an oath just as much as he did, Janet. There's so many violations I could run down and make this podcast into a whole hour. You're a tyrannical dictator. You've broken so many laws in the United States and Maine Constitution, it's not funny anymore. And believe me, it isn't. People's lives were lost. Students' lives were turned upside down during the pandemic, so-called. And many others lost jobs because of you. She finished up by saying people in Maine and across the country are waiting for an economic plan for the current occupant of the White House. And so far, we've seen none. Geez, what planet do you live in, Janet? She says we've seen tariffs and threats of tariffs that threaten our economic stability here in Maine and across the country. All WAGM and WWPI can say is, "We'll have more on that story and from the governor on her back and forth with the president later on the evening report." Garbage. Looks like they're all lame brains up there. As well as any other part of the state that has people who go by her rules. The Attorney General Aaron Fry's rules. The Speaker of the House's rules. Ryan Fecto. That's not law. That's tyranny and dictatorship. Janet. We got one more thing to report on this one, folks, as we talk about freedom of the press, which we've already explained, and we'll put the post up there at the end of our program here to also as well show our links, so you can get our podcasts anytime you want. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have almost 320 at this point on rumble.com. We sent a notice by email to WVOM Radio, who seemed to have a funny bone about Trump saying to Janet Mills that the governor needs to make a full-throated apology request. Full-throated apology to the president. Seems the boys are the hosts at the time on WVOM 101.3 and 103.9 FM if you're looking, if you care. Listen here, boys. Most Maine residents don't think this demand by President Trump is funny, ha 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 ha. It's damn serious. Because Trump is the president of the United States, whether any person out there in public radio hates him or supports him too damn bad. He's the president. 77 million people voted for him, and he wiped out Kamala Harris like she didn't exist. Don't like it? You can leave, just like the celebrities, if you can afford to. Good luck in Canada, by the way. I don't think they want pissed off Mainers going up there and making more rattles and moans and bitches. Governor Mills has a deadline to meet with the federal government on whether to accept Title IX or not. All that Mills keeps saying is see you in court. President Trump is trying to restore the United States as a 50-state country, Janet, to end corruption and tyrannical blue state government dictators like you. Cuts of federal government funding for all Maine schools will happen, whether Mills disagrees with Title IX or not, because it's federal law. When the pen hits the paper, it's going to affect schools from Fort Kent to Kittery, Freiburg to Lubeck. Do I need to be more clear, Ms. Mills? And everybody else out there who thinks they're above the law? I hope not. In the meantime, folks, please stay in touch with us by going right here. For all our podcasts, Fairness in Reporting Media at gmail.com, Fairness in Reporting Media at gmail.com. We cherish and appreciate your input and any ideas you might have for other topics that we can cover. And our website for seeing any podcast goes back over 2.5, almost 3 years now. Rumble.com/fairnessmedia1, rumble.com/fairnessmedia1. As always, folks, thank you for joining us. Stay safe. Make it a nice day for someone who's having a hard day. Make their day a peaceful and joyous one.